This courtly device failed of its effect. Johnson, who thought that all was false and hollow, despised the honeyed words, and was even indignant that Lord Chesterfield should for a moment imagine that he could be stood the dupe of such an artifice. His expression to me concerning Lord Chesterfield upon this occasion was, "Sir, after making great professions, he had for many years taken no notice of me, but when my dictionary was coming out, he felt a scribbling in the world about it." Upon which I wrote him a letter expressed in civil terms, but such as might show him that I did not mind what he said or wrote, and that I had done with him. This is the celebrated letter of which so many has been said, and about which curiosity has been so long excited, without being gratified. I for many years solicited Johnson to favour me with a copy of it, that so excellent a composition might not be lost to posterity. He delayed from time to time to give it to me, till at last in 1781, when we were on a visit to Mr. Dilly's at South Hill of Bedfordshire, he was pleased to dictate it to me from memory. Footnote here, Dr. Johnson appeared to have had a remarkable delicacy with respect to the circulation of this letter. For Dr. Douglas, Bishop of Salisbury, informs me that, having many years ago pressed him to be allowed to read it to the second Lord Hardwicke, who was very desirous to hear it, promising at the same time that no copy of it should be taken, Johnson seemed much pleased that it had attracted the attention of a nobleman of such a respectable character, but after pausing for some time, declined to comply with the request, saying with a smile, "No, sir, I have hurt the dog too much already," or words to that purpose. Johnson afterwards found among his papers a copy of this letter, which he had dictated to Mr. Baretti, with its title and corrections in his own handwriting. This he gave to Mr. Langton, along with that, if he were to come into print, he wished it to be from that copy. By Mr. Langton's kindness, I am enabled to enrich my work with a perfect transcript of what the world has so eagerly desired to see. And now here we have the ultimate diss of Earl of Chesterfield for blowing Johnson off for a while. I hope this is good. I'm psyched up. Anyway, to the right honourable the Earl of Chesterfield, February 1755. My lord, I have been lately informed by the proprietor of the World that two papers in which my dictionary is recommended to the public were written by your lordship. To be so distinguished is an honour, which, being very little accustomed to favours from the great, I know not well how to receive or under what terms to acknowledge. When, upon some slight encouragement, I first visited your lordship, I was overpowered, like the rest of mankind, by the enchantment of your address, and could not forbear to wish that I might boast myself le vainqueur de la terre, that I might obtain that regard for which I saw the world contending. But I found my attendance so little encouraged that neither pride nor modesty would suffer me to continue it. When I had once addressed your lordship in public, I had exhausted all the art of pleasing which a retired and uncourtly scholar can possess. I had done all that I could, and no man is well pleased to have his all neglected, to be it ever so little. 7 years, my lord, have now passed since I waited in your outward rooms or was repulsed from your door, during which time I have been pushing on my work through difficulties of which it is useless to complain. It have brought it at last to the verge of publication without one act of assistance, one word of encouragement, or one smile of favour. Such treatment I did not expect, for I never had a patron before. Footnote here. The following note is subjoined to Mr. Langton. Dr. Johnson, when he gave me this copy of his letter, desired that I would annex to it his information to me that whereas it is said that the letter that no assistance has been received, He did once receive from Lord Chesterfield the sum of £10, but as there was that was so inconsiderable a sum, he thought the mention of it could not properly find place in a letter of this kind that this was. The shepherd in Virgil grew at last acquainted with love, and found him a native of the rocks. I know thee, love, in deserts thou were bred. That's from Dryden. Is not a patron, my lord, one who looks with unconcern on a man struggling for life in the water, and, when he has reached ground, encumbers him with help? The notice which you have been pleased to take of my labours, had it been early, had been kind, but it has been delayed till I am indifferent and cannot enjoy it, till I am solitary and cannot impart in it, till I am known and do not want it. I hope it is no very cynical asperity not to confess obligations where no benefit has been received, or to be unwilling that the public should consider me as owing that to a patron which Providence has enabled me to do for myself. Another footnote here. In this passage, Dr. Johnson evidently alludes to the loss of his wife. We find the same tender recollection recurring to his mind upon innumerable occasions, and perhaps no man ever more forcibly felt the truth of the sentiment so elegantly expressed by my friend Mr. Malone in his prologue to Mr. Jefferson's Tragedy of Julia. Bane, wealth, and fame, and fortune's fostering care, if no fond breast the splendid blessings share, in each day's bustling pageantry once past, there, only there, our bliss is found at last. So that was alluding to when Johnson said, I am indifferent and cannot enjoy it, till I am solitary and cannot impart it. Having carried on my work thus far with so little obligation to any favor of learning, I shall not be disappointed, though I should conclude it, if less be possible, with less. For I have been long wakened from the dream of hope, in which I once boasted myself with so much exultation, my lord, your lordship's most humble, most obedient servant, Sam Johnson. Wow, that was quite a diss, yeah. Upon comparing this copy with that which Dr. Johnson dictated to me from recollection, the variations are found to be so slight that they must be added to the many other proofs which he gave of the wonderful extent and accuracy of his memory. To gratify the curious in composition, I have deposited both the copies in the British Museum. Footnote here from the editor of this thing. Only one is there, so Boswell's lying, or somebody stole the other copy, maybe. I don't know. While this was the talk of the town, says Dr. Abrams in a letter to me, I happened to visit Dr. Warburton, who, finding that I was acquainted with Johnson, desired me earnestly to carry his compliments to him and to tell him that he honored him for his manly behavior in rejecting these condensations of Lord Chesterfield, and for resenting the treatment he had received from him with a proper spirit. Johnson was visibly pleased with this compliment, for he had always a high opinion of Warburton. Indeed, the force of mind which appeared in this letter was congenial with that which Warburton himself amply possessed. Soon after Edwards' Canons of Criticism came out, Johnson was dining at Tonson the bookseller's with Hayman and Painter and some more company. Hayman related to Sir Joshua Reynolds that the conversation having turned upon Edwards' book, the gentleman praised it much, and Johnson allowed its merit. But when they went farther, and appeared to put that author upon a level with Warburton, nay, said Johnson, he has given him some smart hits to be sure, but there is no proportion between the two men. They must not be named together. A fly, sir, may sting a stately horse and make him wince, but one is but an insect, and the other is a horse still. That's pretty good. Anyway, there is a curious minute circumstances which struck me in comparing the various editions of Johnson's imitations of Juvenal. In the 10th satire, one of the couplets upon the vanity of wishes, even for literary distinction, stood thus: Yet think, what ills the scholar's life assail, pride, envy, want, the garret, and the jail. But after experiencing the uneasiness which Lord Chesterfield's fallacious patronage made him feel, he dismissed the word garret from the sad group, and in the subsequent edition the line stands: toil, envy, want, the patron, and the jail. He really didn't like this Lord Chesterfield blowing him off. Now, Lord Chesterfield must have been mortified by the lofty contempt and polite yet keen satire with which Johnson exhibited him to himself in this letter. It is impossible to doubt. He, however, with the glossy duplicity which was his constant study, affected to be quite unconcerned. Dr. Adams mentioned to Mr. Robert Dodsley that he was sorry Johnson had written his letter to Lord Chesterfield. Dodsley, with the true feelings of trade, said he was very sorry for that he had a property in the dictionary to which his lordship's patronage might have been of consequence. He then told Dr. Adams that Lord Chesterfield had showed him the letter. I should have imagined, replied Dr. Adams, that Lord Chesterfield would have concealed it. Poh, said Dodsley. Do you think a letter from Johnson could hurt Lord Chesterfield? Not at all, sir. It lay upon his table where anybody might see it. He said it to me, said, This man has great powers, pointed out the severest passages, and observed how well they were expressed. Now, this air of indifference which imposed upon the worthy Dodsley was certainly nothing but a specimen of that dissimulation which Lord Chesterfield calculated as one of the most essential lessons for the conduct of life. His lordship endeavoured to justify himself to Dodsley from the charges brought against him by Johnson, but we may judge of the flimsiness of his defence from his having excused his neglect of Johnson by saying that he had heard he had changed his lodgings and did not know where he lived. Yeah, as if there could have been the smallest difficulty to inform himself of that circumstance by inquiring in the literary circle with which his lordship was well acquainted, and was indeed himself one of his ornaments. It's got you there. Dr. Adams expostulated with Johnson and suggested that his not being admitted when he called on him was probably not to be imputed to Lord Chesterfield, for his lordship had declared to Dodsley that he would have turned off the best servant he ever had if he had known that he denied him to a man who would have been always more than welcome. And, in confirmation of this, he insisted on Lord Chesterfield's general affability and easiness of access, especially to literary men. Sir, said Johnson, that is not Lord Chesterfield. He is the proudest man this day existing. No, said Dr. Adams, there is one person at least as proud. I think by your own account, you are the prouder man of the two. But mine, replied Johnson instantly, was defensive pride. This, as Dr. Adams well observed, was one of those happy turns for which he was remarkably ready. Johnson, having now explicitly avowed his opinion of Lord Chesterfield, did not refrain from expressing himself concerning that nobleman with pointed freedom. This man, said he, I thought had been a lord among wits, but I find he is only a wit among lords. And when his letters to his natural son were published, he observed that they teach the morals of a whore and the manners of a dancing master. That collection of letters cannot be vindicated from the serious charge of encouraging in some passages one of the vices most destructive to the good order and comfort of society, which his lordship represents as mere fashionable gallantry, and in others of inculcating the base practice of dissimulation and recommending, with a disproportionate anxiety, a perpetual attention to external elegance of manners. But it must at the same time be allowed that they contain many good precepts of conduct, and much genuine information upon life and manners, very happily expressed, and that there was considerable merit in paying so much attention to the improvement of one who was dependent upon his lordship's protection. It was probably been exceeded in no instance by the most exemplary parents. And though I can by no means approve of confounding the distinction between lawful and illicit offspring, which is in effect insulting the civil establishment of our country, to look no higher, I cannot help thinking it laudable to be kindly attentive to those of whose existence we have, in any way, been the cause. Mr. Stanhope's character has been unjustly represented as diametrically opposite to what Lord Chesterfield wished him to be. He has been called dull, gross, and awkward. But I know him as Dresden when he was envoy to the court, and though he could not boast of the graces, he was in truth a sensible, civil, well-behaved man. I have no idea what that's all about. Some bastard son of Lord Chesterfield, I'm guessing. The character of a respectable Hottentot in Lord Chesterfield's letters has been generally understood to be meant for Johnson, and I have no doubt that it is. But I remember when the literary property of those letters was contested in the Court of Sessions in Scotland, and Mr. Henry Dudas, now one of His Majesty's principal Secretaries of State, one of the Council of the Proprietors at the time, read this character as an exhibition of Johnson, Sir David Dalrymple, I don't know how to pronounce that name, Dalrymple. Lord Hailey's, one of the judges, maintained, with some warmth, that it was not intended as a portrait of Johnson, but as of a late noble lord, distinguished from obtuse science. Probably George II, Earl of Mansfield, says Croker, another editor of this book. You following all this? I'm not. I don't know what this... I need some backstory on what this letter is they're talking about. Anyway, I have heard Johnson himself talk of the character and say that it was meant for Lord Lyttelton, in which I could not by no means agree. For his lordship has nothing of the violence which is a conspicuous feature of the composition. Finding that my illustrious friend could bear to have it supposed that it might be meant for him, I said laughingly that there was one trait which unquestionably did not belong to him. He throws his meat anywhere but down his throat. Sir, said Johnson, Lord Chesterfield never saw me eat in his life. On the 6th of March came out Lord Bolingbroke's works, published by Mr. David Mallet. The wild and pernicious ravings under the name of philosophy, which were thus ushered into the world, gave great offence to all well-principled men. Johnson, hearing all their tendency, which nobody disputed, was roused with a just indignation, and pronounced this memorable sentence upon the noble author and his editor. Quote Johnson, Sir, he was a scoundrel and a coward. A scoundrel for charging blunderness against religion and morality. A coward because he had not resolution to fire it off himself, but left half a crown to a beggarly Scotchman to draw this trigger after his death. Garrick, who I can attest from my own knowledge, had his mind seasoned with pious reverence, and sincerely disapproved of the infidel writings of several, whom in this course of his almost universal gay intercourse with men of eminence, he treated with external civility, distinguished himself upon this occasion. Mr. Pelham, having died on the very day on which Lord Bolingbroke's works came out, he wrote an elegant ode on his death, beginning, and I quote, Let others hail the rising sun, I bow to that whose course is run. In which is the following stanza, The same sad morn to church and state, say for our sins 'twas fixed by fate. A double stroke was given, Black as the whirlwinds of the north, St. John's fell genius issued forth, and Pelham fled to heaven. Ooh, this is some inside baseball stuff now. I have no idea what's going on. I mean, I got the part where he was upset with Chesterfield for not giving him money. But then Chesterfield's letters to his bastard son, making fun of Johnson, I didn't really get that. And this Lord Bolingbroke's stupid book on philosophy. Need a little more background on that. I wish we had footnotes on background, not on just name dropping. But what are you going to do? Till next time, bye from Boswell.